To watch free subtitled episodes of the Paramount Plus Zorro television show, feel free to join the link in the description to the Zorro's Lair Discord server, where you'll be able to download episodes in the Welcome and Library section. Hello everyone, welcome back to the cast of Zorro. This is Jack Cluck, and today I am with Worm and with Crow, and it's been a bit. How are you guys?
I'm doing good today. Ate food, and I am ready to talk about Zorro.
I'm doing quite well.
Nice to hear. I'm glad to be doing another episode of this again, especially since there's some pretty neat news. Starting with something kind of bad news, but also at the same time there's at least something good about it. Mm-hmm. Paramount Plus Zorro is finally out.
Yay!
Just in Europe.
What?
Just in Europe.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
that's is that the French one?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the French one. Yeah.
So before I get to the silver lining to this, so the show is out across the rest of Europe. You can basically see it anywhere around that region. Nowhere else though, except if you join our Zorro Discord server. And before you say anything, like, one of the people on there has been able to successfully pirate it, and I have put it on our news and announcements page. So if you want to watch the show with maybe not perfect English subtitles, but good enough.
Good enough.
Then our server has a copy of it for you to watch for free. So if you are really tired of waiting for a show that is probably not going to come out here for a while, just hop on here and watch some Zorro.
Yeah.
And, which is why for the episode after this, we'll probably be covering that show, since we have the ability to watch it. So, there's that. Another piece of Zorro news, actually also relating to a Zorro show finally being out, is the Sequoia Studios Zorro is finally out in Italy. It was finally released, I think, a month and a half ago.
By out in Italy, do you mean like there's an Italian dub available, or like it's just available to view in Italy now?
Both. There was I mean, I think they were able to view it on Amazon. I'm not quite sure of all the details. I'll have to ask, but they released. I think they released it on cable in Italy now. They also have an Italian dub now on Amazon Prime, and I think they gave it a different name too. They gave it a subtitle. I don't remember how to pronounce it. It was like Love and Vengeance or something. It was pretty cool. I kind of wish they did it for the rest of the show, because just calling it Zorro or Sequoia Studios Zorro gets old after a while. But
yeah, that's fair enough.
Oh well. In any case, this is honestly a huge net positive for the show, because there's been a lot of general love and stuff like that I've been seeing from a lot of people in Italy for the show.
Mm-hmm. And not just for this show, we've talked about multiple times, like, Italy has been historically one of the bigger audiences when it comes to the Zorro franchise, so...
Yeah.
Exactly. And, like, I guess it should be like a no-brainer that it's successful here, but like I was just kind of pleasantly surprised, because on my TikTok I post a lot of Zorro edits and stuff like that on
TikTok?
There.
Your tiki-taki?
Yes, I like to post Zorro edits on TikTok. It's either that or Instagram. Flip that card. So true. And I got a lot of likes and comments now from my Sequoia Studios Zorro edits from people from Italy. And I'm like, where did all of these people come from? Oh,
yeah.
So that's been pretty positive. That's something I've been liking quite a bit. But yeah, I'm just another case of this show being really successful when people are actually like able to watch it, or you know, when they hear about it. Because the main problem with this show's release is there's a lot of people who just don't know about it at all, but almost everyone who finds this show seems to really enjoy it. So it's just like, please make season 2 and advertise it more. I beg of you, please. let's see. Probably that's pretty much it for that one. There's another.
Hmm.
There's another neat piece of Zorro news. This is a fan project, though. A while back in 2018 or 19, there was a fan film made in Argentina called Zorro El Sentimiento de Hierro, or The Sentiment of Iron.
Hmm.
They are finally making a sequel. I don't know how to pronounce this in Spanish. I don't want to butcher it. But in English, it translates to Zorro Returns.
Hmm.
And this movie is going to be taking heavily from the Alain Delon Zorro movie.
Oh shit!
So Diego and his son, I don't remember the name of his son, but he's there. They are both going to go to Nueva Aragon, and they are going to fight Colonel Huerta from that movie.
Huh?
Which is really cool. I
That
think
is
that's really
awesome. Yeah.
The first movie has like Monasterio and stuff like that, and a pretty faithful portrayal of him.
Mhm.
And this one's gonna have Colonel Huerta in it, and we'll have to see how he plays. I'm really excited.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know much about it right now, aside from there's footage of it, which is cool.
Mhm.
It looks pretty nice. One thing I really hope they don't do is they don't use archival footage, because I feel like that was one of the biggest problems that previous fan film had. They just, like, instead of hiring someone to play Garcia, they just
have footage. They use stock footage. Yeah.
Yeah.
That they had.
But other than that, I'm pretty excited. It's always nice to see Zorro fan anything.
Yeah,
And I will
true.
definitely be hyping it up. Looping back around to Sequoia Studios Zorro, the show by January 19th, 2025 is now a year old.
Huh.
Nothing really big except, well, a year ago I had my world rocked by this show, and wow, time flies. Like,
Yeah. God.
It's strange to think that it has already been a year, but at the same time, like, you know, time flies when you're a piece of shit.
So true.
Alright. I mean, yeah, time flies when you're a piece of shit, I guess. But, like,
Yeah.
oh my god, this show means so much to me. Like, a year ago, I just distinctly remember the first thing that I did when I got up in the morning that day was just to watch this show and binge the entire thing for 10 hours. I was that excited for it. I loved it that much. It is honestly just one of my favorite versions of this character now, and I'm just so thankful that it was made in the first place, especially as someone who's been waiting for a live-action version of this character for so long. It's just, oh my god, it's just so special, and I'm just so happy that it's been in my life for a year now. Here's soup, another year more, and another and another. So far, that's pretty much all of the news now for this episode. It's been kind of quiet recently, which is fine.
You can't expect just to have banger after banger after banger. Like, we got a lot of shows in decently quick succession after such a huge drought of original content. So
yeah, the fact that there is new Zorro news at all is something I'm still getting adjusted to. For years, we've basically had such a drought, as you mentioned. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's just absolutely special that we're just getting something new, just new stuff in general. And like last episode, we mentioned that, you know, there's another Zorro show that's, you know, finally being worked on again, and the fact that there's just Zorro projects that have been out, Zorro projects that are being made and actually look like they're going to be made. Oh god, it's a good time to be a Zorro fan. It is a really good time.
Yeah.
And like, even if you don't really like some of the new projects, I've met some people who don't really care for Sequoia Studios Zorro. I've met some people who really don't like Paramount Plus Zorro. But the fact that there is just new stuff for this character, is just, it's just special. It is so special.
I have a question. Because of the frequency and the quality of the current, I guess, lineup of shows and media and comics and books and everything, would you say, Jack, that we are living in the golden age of Zorro?
That is a good question. We are definitely living in
a renaissance, I would say.
some
Not
kind
a
of
golden age,
revival
'cause,
era,
it's just sort of
basically.
starting, but it's like a renaissance where those properties are now being revived again, and we're going to probably see a new wave of content coming through now after the successes of these past two shows.
Exactly. We are basically seeing. We're seeing a Zorro
Sons. Clever.
We're seeing, because it's been kind of the return of a lot of different classic characters over the past few years, which is really nice. And it's good to see Zorro getting his dues as well. It's good to see this character coming back, even if it's not like the most, like bombastic return. It's just nice. It's nice to see characters as obscure as Zorro making a comeback. And I don't know, I don't really have much else to say other than here's to getting more Zorro content, and here's to being free now that Zorro's back. Alright, speaking of, new current Zorro projects, since we're done with the news, let's talk about the topic for this episode, which is Sequoia Studios Zorro Episode 3, The Bet. We're finally getting back to Sequoia Studios. Yeah.
Bet.
Alright.
I love Let's go gambling!
True, the episode begins with gambling, so definitely, and it introduces a lot of really interesting concepts in doing so. It does something that Zorro has kind of dabbled in before, but this show basically dives headfirst in. And that it talks about the Chinese community in California, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
There's been stuff involving China and Chinese people in Zorro stuff before, tracing all the way back to the 1957 Walt Disney Zorro, but that was a Chinese person specifically coming over to California to escape from human trafficking. It's not like a story about someone who lives in California as a Chinese person. But this show, it highlights two major Chinese characters. Both of which are introduced in the opening gambling scene. There's Senor Chang, who is such a good antagonist in Zorro. I'm gonna talk about this in my video that I'm working on. He is an amazing concept of that I introduced as an idea in my Zorro villains video. Of someone who indirectly is a threat to Zorro. Someone who isn't, going to sword fight them or shoot at them. And someone who, you have to outmaneuver. And Senor Chang does this perfectly. Because he is basically untouchable. He's basically completely untouchable by Zorro. Because of the influence that he has over the Chinese Californian community. And so Zorro has to kind of play his game all the time, and he has to basically, maneuver around all of the trickery and deceit and stuff that he does. And he's so interesting for that. Because we rarely ever get a villain like that. We never get a villain who's always in control of things. Usually Zorro is always in control of things. But in, these scenarios, he isn't. He has to basically bide his time. He has to try and get his W's in where he can with Senor Chang. And
now, you said he doesn't fight, but not to say that he's gonna duel Zorro, but he does have an. He does.
He has minions to do his dirty work for him.
True, he does, and oh my god, one of the best fight scenes in the entire show basically happens in this episode with Senor Chang's bodyguards. If any of you have ever seen Daredevil or The Raid or anything like that, this episode will absolutely tickle that part of you. Like, there's a whole fight scene where Zorro gets to like fist fight a bunch of bodyguards with clubs and swords and weapons and stuff like that. It is so cool.
It felt like a scene out of Reacher.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen Reacher, but if there's like a lot of like fight scenes in hallways. And,
yeah,
like,
it's I guess the closest it could be considered to is like the Punisher.
Oh yeah, that too.
Kind of.
Yeah, I can kind of. I think
less violent than the Punisher,
yeah.
but still brutal.
Yeah, like there is some brutal fight moves that Diego puts on those guys. Like, there's like he pulls out one of his throwing knives at some point and just stabs a dude through the hand and pins him to the wall like Michael Myers.
And then someone pulls a sword, and then he's just like, okay, I guess I'm ripping this knife out of your hand now.
They're just throwing it at him. And to the dude's credit, even after getting stabbed through the hand, he still tries to have a go at him. So whatever Senior Chang is paying these guys must have been crazy the way they were just throwing themselves at Zorro like that. Oh my god. And a lot of the fight scenes too, like a lot of the fight scenes in the show are well choreographed, but this one in particular apparently was like one of the harder ones too. Apparently, like, it was just absolutely exhausting to film, which is completely fair, but you can just tell how well thought out and well paced it is. And like, Zorro is constantly having pressure put on him by these guys. He's constantly having to check his back in case someone tries to hit him. He's constantly like having to beat these enemies and stuff like that, because like if he loses one bit of ground, then they'd be able to overwhelm and kill him. It is such a well-paced fight, and it never feels like it loses steam until the very end, which it ends. Yeah. And there's just a lot of really memorable stuff about it too. Like the fight opens with him basically like command grabbing a guy with his weapon, slamming him into a table.
Yeah.
That was so cool. That is so cool. And it's
I was gonna point out like that the first like two people who he fought, he like was just using some moves with like the whip and with his fist, and I'm like, oh, he's kind of beating him up, but he's really just trying to get to the end of this gauntlet. He's not here to do like major damage, have the owner refurbish the place. And I'm like, oh, how respectful. Then the guy gets choke slammed through a table. Later on, you get some other poor schmuck defenestrated. Some guy gets stabbed through the stabbed through the hand. Later on, someone gets stabbed through the foot. And through the floor. Yeah, he got collided.
Not intentional. Yeah, through 2 floors. Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, it was absolutely such a chaotic, and for the Zorro franchise, a brutal fight. Because we don't get a lot of that kind of stuff in Zorro. We usually like, if this was like Family Channel Zorro for the 90s, he would just kind of, punch some of the dudes in the face and have them tumble over each other, and it would have like a cheesy punch.
No, we're in the era where you have shows like Invincible, where people are... I mean, I know it's a cartoon, but people are on TV and pummeling the crap out of each other. And fight scenes are a little bit more... Exactly. They all resemble Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. They're just... The hero gets the shit kicked out of them. The villain gets the shit kicked out of them. And they just brawl. Now, I know Zorro's supposed to be like a character about, finesse, timing, speed, trickery a little bit. But, oh, nah, he's just throwing hands.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, like, while he still embodies a lot of those things in this show, and there's like some scenes where like he is being like pushed against the corner and he fights like a cornered, scared animal. And it's so cool. It is so interesting to see a different side to this character. Excuse me. It's so interesting to see a different side to this character like that. Because I know a lot of people like there's a lot of people that are like, I don't know, this show's not bad, but it's too different for me, which is completely fair. But I love that. It is such a different side to this character you never see. And I don't know, I just think it's really special. And especially even after the end of the fight, like, he only uses his sword once, and it's just to drop it on some poor guy's foot, which I absolutely love.
That, yeah.
Oh my god, I think the whole scene is absolutely brilliant, and I do wish that we got one or two more like fist fight scenes in the show, but I feel like this one was like really good, and I'm kind of hoping that season 2, if it ever comes out, has one more like that. But it's not just the that one fight scene that I'd say is also like the I'd say another highlight is probably I was trying to think of it. Another highlight is probably when he tries to rescue May from, in terms of like the action, from all of like Ramirez's men. Like, I absolutely, even though it's really short, like him taking her, jumping out of the window and using his whip to like swing back on into the room, even if it didn't work, was really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love the action in this show. It is just so perfect. And it's not just the action that's really good, too. In this show, there's a lot, in this episode specifically, there's a lot of really good dialogue. And, like, especially Senor Chang, too, in his opening dialogue with Ramirez.
No, he gets a lot of great lines.
Exactly. And, like, he legitimately sounds, like, really intelligent. It's hard to write a smart character. But this show managed to do it really well in making like Senor Chang a very intelligent, you know, well thought out character. Everything he says kind of makes sense, and like you're like, okay, yeah, I can kind of get like what his plan is in every scene he's in this episode and in other episodes. And I feel like it's like they do really good with him as a villain. Another villain in this episode that I absolutely love to hate was Ramirez. He's such a fucking slime bag. Like, obviously Zorro is no, you know, stranger to really terrible, awful, slimy people, but he is a good example of that. He is disgusting.
He is,
Like,
one thing that I didn't like about both Zorro and Ramirez in this episode is it sort of told a story but backwards with with especially how it worked in terms of fight. Like, we were talking about the Chinese like hall scene where he's got enemies around every corner. He's checking everything. He's being so careful. At the start of the episode, he's being very careful as Zorro. And then he manages to evade Ramirez, ambush Ramirez, slice him up, carve him with the Z, escape, and then later on in the episode, he just forgets to be careful, I suppose, and he gets ambushed. That, to me, if you have two fight scenes, one's a stealth scene more, but two scenes where it's showing that Zorro is very clearly able to outfox his opponent in this case, and then just have him be purely jebaited off of what I thought was quite obviously a bait, because obviously we talk a lot about like, oh, sometimes tropes where the lady was, going out to the balcony and then walking back in. Ramirez said he had her doing that for 3 hours. If Zorro would just wait in the shrubbery for like 1 more minute, just to put some of his equipment on his horse, and then saw her coming back out again, instead of throwing a grappling hook and immediately getting himself detected and baited, he could have so easily avoided that if he had just thought for like half a second.
That's fair. Although, to be fair, his mental state was kind of one out of frustration at that point, so I think it is like, I don't think he was in the right headspace, like, oh, come on, she just ran off and now I have to go, like, get her again. I don't think he was fully thinking, like, oh, maybe, Ramirez was setting up, like, a trap and stuff like that. Although, to be fair, I guess she was kind of, like, standing in his house, so, I mean, I don't know. I can kind of see that as a bit of a writing flaw. I can also kind of see that as a bit of, like, Diego himself not thinking things through this time like he normally does.
The first time that he spotted her, she was tied up and like unable to go anywhere. Then now she's like allowed to roam freely after she evaded capture and then was recaptured. There's no way, if he thought for half a second that she would have been allowed to roam free like that without being a bait, he could have seen through it easily. That's my opinion.
Exactly, and I kind of agree with it too.
Yeah, I guess that's actually probably the only really
Mm-hmm.
Like, as for like Ramirez himself as a villain, though, I think that's completely fair. Honestly, I can absolutely see that. Like, yeah. I guess that's actually probably. I guess that's probably the only really complaint I'd have about this episode, so that's fair. Let's see. Like, as for, like, Ramirez himself as a villain, though, I think that he's really good, and that he kind of fills the, the position of, like, the really hateable guy who you love to see suffer by Zorro. Because a lot of Zorros have that kind of character. Especially, like, if sometimes, like, usually they're the main villain, but not always. And with him, he is, like, deliciously evil in a way that also makes you feel really grossed out. Mm-hmm. He is basically a slave owner, like, chomping on cigars while ordering people to, like, whip people, like, level of cartoonishly evil person, which obviously existed and stuff like that, which honestly just makes it even worse. Like, he is just such a, like, a very, since basically he's just a rich guy. He's just a
and uses
guy.
Them as a poker chip.
I don't know, it just makes him worse in some way than just, like, like, because Sino Chang is obviously, like, a really bad person, and he exploits his own community and uses them and stuff like that. But the person... Yeah, exactly. But it's Ramirez that wants her to be the poker chip, and the reason why is so gross. I don't even want to talk about it in the podcast episode. But, like... Like, he's just this person who sees the Chinese and Native American communities and is like, basically he just sees them as his pawns that he can just use to get rich quick. And it's just so gross, the level of complete and utter disrespect he has for human life. Because during the show, when Zorro is trying to talk to Meilin about her sister, he sees the mine that Ramirez owns explode, and some people die, some people get injured, and he starts rescuing some people, and he calls the nurse lady that's more relevant later on to help. He does way more to help than Ramirez does, because Ramirez, all he thinks about is, wow, that's gonna be a setback. This will really affect the economy. And when a woman in the square who's protesting walks up to him and tells him that her husband died, he's like, okay, send your sons in this place, badass. Like, it's so gross, and I completely get why Nolan was ready to stab the dude then and there. Like, oh my god, he is just utterly vile as a person. And we have a lot of antagonists who have a level of nuance in this show, so it's just nice to see someone who's just cartoonishly evil, and especially someone who gets his just desserts by, like, getting punched and tortured and stuff like that by Diego. That was pretty cool. That was pretty fun. I mentioned earlier about Meilin. That was another Chinese perspective that I had so far neglected to mention about the show. Mei is a really good addition to the Zorro mythos. And
well, first she's sold to Mr. Chang. Like, her father sells her to Mr. Chang, and then Mr. Chang uses her as a poker chip in a game against Ramirez.
She's basically sold away to, be Ramirez's slave and stuff like that.
Fully.
Yeah. Yeah. And with no one else to turn to, Meilin basically calls for Zorro's help. She calls for she doesn't even know that he exists, particularly outside of, like, she's heard about, like, whispers of him and stuff like that. And it's so cool, but also so heartbreaking. Like, Zorro is really the last line of defense of the people of California in a lot of stories, and it just shows here, because a lot of people in California have no one to turn to if it weren't for Zorro. And I think it's another really interesting thing about, like, we've talked in the last episode before about, like, Nalan being Zorro but only really helping her own community instead of seeing California as a community. There are so many different groups of people in California who desperately need Zorro's help, because they are treated like less than dirt by, like, the various oppressors and stuff like that. And that's why Zorro is needed to protect them, because the government ignores the fact that there is slavery going on despite it being against Mexican law. The landowners are the ones enslaving them, so who else are they supposed to turn to aside from Zorro, even if some of them don't know he actually exists? And seeing her light up, seeing Meilin just light up like a Christmas tree when she sees Zorro is so utterly cathartic. And you know what it also kind of reminds me? I was thinking a lot about this. She reminds me a lot of, like, in-universe, like, Alejandra Murrieta from Mask of Zorro as a kid. Like, someone who is begging for Zorro to come and save people as a small child, and he does, and was, like, just such a fan that
I
like that Zorro's experience, like, Zorro's, like, presence changes his life. And she reminds me so much of that. And I know that she doesn't return after episode 3, but, like, it's just so cool to see this character touch the lives of people in universe like he does out of universe.
Who knows Chinese, really, surprisingly.
And also, like, side note, I love the fucking the gag that this episode does, where just Meilin doesn't know Spanish, so he's constantly having to just drag Bernardo around and, like, I don't know if they ever explain it, but I wouldn't be surprised considering that he and Alejandro went on a decent amount of adventures, according to him, before, like, you know, Alejandro died. So he probably picked up Chinese, like, along the way. And once again, this version of Bernardo, absolute goat.
Yeah.
You know, always being able to help out and stuff like that. And it also starts the really funny tradition of him wearing...
No, the first time it kind of made sense, and then the second time, he's like, oh, this shit again.
And seeing him, you know, like, having to translate all the time is just really funny. I love that running gag where he's just constantly having to...
The first time Zorro was like, hey, by the way, you speak Chinese, right? Could I enlist your help in something? And then the second time, Zorro just throws the mask at him, and he's like... I
know, it's like...
And he's like, don't ask questions. You come down.
Having to translate for Malin. Yeah, and he's like, sure. He just throws the hood in his face, and he's like, are you kidding me? I
fucking love that though, because in like Disney Zorro, and I think almost every Zorro medium, it's like Zorro doesn't need to or does not take time to plan certain things. In a lot of cases, they put a time thing. It's like, oh no, this person is gonna they threw a bomb in the well, and in 3 hours the bomb is gonna explode, and we'll have no more water in the village. But in a lot of cases, it's like, oh, this person's in jail now. Oh, well. It's like Zorro could take like a day to analyze the surroundings, how many guards there are, before he even does anything. He kind of just rushes in. This wasn't even for that. He took a whole day and night just to get Bernardo to ask questions to May and figure out what was wrong.
Exactly. And I mean, like, because it's just assumed by the audience that Zorro plans something out normally before he does it. It's not really shown, it's just, like, implied. But, like, here it's just like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take an entire day's worth of time to be able to do it, but I'm going to do it. And we see that play out, and it's really entertaining. And it's also just...
It makes being Zorro, dare I say, it makes being Zorro look so much harder and so much more exhausting. Seeing the process of like, oh, I need to solve this. I want to help this person. I need to solve their problem. I need to help here, but I just. Oh, I have to travel back on horse, then I have to do this side quest, then I have to get a translator because I don't even know what's wrong yet. All I know is they're in distress. I can't just go knocking on doors to find out what's wrong. I gotta actually figure this out. Oh my goodness. Oh, what am I gonna do? I have to eat dinner in like 2 hours. So...
Exactly, and it fits so well with one of the kind of quiet themes of the show.
No, we cannot.
Being Zorro makes Diego suffer a lot, like, and the fact that like you see him have to go through so much just to save this one person, and like at the end basically go through all that he goes through in this episode and the next for it, like. He could not catch a break. In the other Zorros, you see some of the kind of strife and struggle that he goes through a bit, but it's not as much as what Sequoia's...
Oh, yeah. If we were to take Disney Zorro, like, Diego would look at Bernardo. He's like, "Well, yes, Bernardo. It seems like this person might be in trouble. We might not. Yes, I'm afraid Zorro might have to attack tonight. Yes, Bernardo, you might want to prepare the horse. In this, he's like, all right, I'm already on my way, but this shit takes so long." Yeah, Bernardo's more like, fuck this. This is some upkeep. You really gotta fix this shit. You gotta figure your shit out, man.
Exactly, and Bernardo is less like, enthusiastic, and we're just like, okay, fine.
Oh yeah.
I literally just helped you. Which I absolutely love. I love that this show, Paramount Plus does this as well in different ways, but this show highlights the inconvenience of being Zorro, and I love that a lot. Like, I love that it's like, it feels more human, if that makes sense. Zorro feels less like a larger-than-life figure and more like a person trying to do the right thing, and it really works very well for the character, and especially how much he gets hurt and stuff like that too. It's perfect. Let's see, honestly, let's see, outside of Zorro, I feel like there's some really interesting stuff too. One of the things I was gonna mention is I really like some of the Lolita scenes in this episode. She doesn't appear as much in this episode compared to some of the others, but I do like some of the character stuff that she's given. I thought it was really funny that
honestly, I feel like if you removed like the one
really
scene of Lolita at the start and like the one part where Nalin
really
almost stabs Ramirez but then doesn't,
show, but I get why
you keep everything else
so
about that Ramirez really scene, but you just don't have Nalin in it. This is basically like a short film. There is a beginning, middle, and end, although it does end on a cliffhanger, but we'll get into that later. It's a very self-contained story because you have the introduction and the ending of Mei and Mei Lin and of Chang. And
I think that's why I like this.
It all just feels like it's one
this is like
episode of a serial.
Villains, just in general, in terms of all of Zorro media and whatever. But also, I just kind of love how self-contained it is. And you could sort of just watch like it by itself, and you can get a very satisfying story out of it. And I really like it that much.
Yeah,
I know in previous... Yeah, sorry to cut you off. In previous, Jack, I know you've hosted many, like, not movie nights, but, Zorro TV nights, I guess, where you were watching Sequoia and it was either an earlier episode or a later episode, because I had never seen this one, but I remember seeing snippets of like a different episode when I just came in and started watching with y'all, and I was a little bit lost on first time because I feel like there was a lot of info that I was missing. Like even in this, like I've watched episodes 1 and 2, but a little while ago. So when she was talking about it, like at the beginning, and like, oh, Diego, you were a coward about that thing, and I'm like, shit. I really wish that there was like a last time on Dragon Ball Z before all this started, so I can understand what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
I sort of remember. I remember the bank heist. I remember all that, and I remember that
show itself, but
like how he sort of took care of it. And I think that was Nalin in the Zorro Con.
Since you watched episode 2 and get to 3,
she was the one who did the shit.
Oh
right?
yeah, the bank heist. I forgot.
Right. And honestly, in terms of a show, like, I do wish that we had more Nalin in this episode, but you can only dedicate so much screen time to characters who aren't important to the story of that episode. So
defeats the
showing that she exists still, and also I think showing sort of like a similarity, how Nalin was straight up ready to just murk Ramirez in the town square, but the only reason she didn't is because there were so many guards. Like, there was no way she would get out of that alive. Meanwhile, Zorro has Ramirez dead to rights, doesn't kill him, instead taunts him. Like, that's gonna fit. Like, this is a guy who is engaging in slavery. This is a guy who's attempting to remove of you and everything that you are as well. You need to just be like, okay, I'm gonna free this person. Oh, also, just slit his throat. Yeah, and because he didn't die, it bites fucking Zorro in the ass. Yeah. I guess we talk about the cliffhanger now?
Exactly, because if Nalin was there, he would be a dead man, but since it's Diego, he's not really like that.
Run away again, and get... Yeah.
Yeah, because Diego does return after humiliating Ramirez, and Ramirez filled with anger over, having...
Yeah, he springs the trap, and although Zorro does sort of escape it for a second, he then falls right back into it, and then he gets unmasked. And the villain does not die either. He runs away with the knowledge that the hero is alive and their identity. And I don't think they're going to do a whole thing of like, I don't think they're going to like No Way Home this, where they're like,
I thought
Zorro is Don Diego, and then everybody knows. I think he keeps this identity. I'm sorry, Far From Home. Far From Home.
The world will forget that Diego de la Vega ever existed.
They're not going to do that. But they're also, I don't think they're going to have,
for some reason, my mind thought you meant like
the main villain with the knowledge that he's Zorro.
We'll save the Zorro No Way Home stuff.
They're not going to do that.
No,
but they're also, I don't think they're going to have,
you're right.
Like, the main villain with the knowledge that he's Zorro, and like not be able to tell people, like, oh, maybe Zorro blackmails him in some way, or maybe he's like, I figured it out, but also like, oh, how do you prove that? And then everybody doubts him. Maybe they go that route. Or maybe they just kill him in the next 2 episodes or something, because you really can't have a despicable villain like that, who's essentially like a slaver and Now, I understand that this is supposed to... The reason why we hate this is because the character is so much more like recognizable as being like human evil. In previous Zorros, I would even say like they had worse people for villains, like Monasterio in Disney. He's just like, okay, you don't want to give up Sanctuary? All right, I'm just going to take like your entire flock of people, and I'm just going to have them moving boulders and whipped into oblivion for like 2 days. Until I get thwarted. This guy, he's sort of trying to keep a lot of his evil deeds hidden from people, while also being unable to hide the fact that he is a despicable scumbag, to the point where, although they almost succeed in poisoning him. By the way, that poisoning scene, and when I was watching it, I was so frustrated, but it was so real. It was so real the way she was fucking up.
Oh, that's a different villain, but you are honestly right about the guy that was gonna get poisoned, Pedro Victoria. Yeah. He's very similar on like a macro level, because that guy is also very like...
Pedro Victoria is like the mayor or something, right?
Yeah, he's the governor. He's because for context,
and Ramirez is just a rich guy then.
He's he's one of the Dons, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
the governor type.
Because the reason why Lolita's mother was trying to poison him was because he was ready to get Lolita killed by Monasterio by not telling him that she was in the bank despite knowing. And so when she finds out about this, she's like, "I'm gonna kill this motherfucker. I'm gonna kill him."
Damn. Oh, but Monasterio loves Lolita. They can turn. Yeah. So now her whole thing is to turn Monasterio against. Okay. Okay, yeah. I sort of see where. I'm glad then that she didn't succeed in poisoning him, because she would have been found out immediately, because she's the one who fucking prepared the drinks.
Yeah, and also the Baroness Ivanova. She also wants to like help her somehow. You'll have to see how, but she does want to help her with something. Yeah, no, I was like, which also sets up.
I was really like, damn, everybody is suspicious. Like this guy is like sniffing his fucking tart. Like he didn't turn over his shoulder, but I'm like, this guy's definitely gonna smell his wine too. Like you're not gonna get away with poisoning him. So
exactly. And in that scene, by the way, I love Monasterio in that scene.
I love Monasterio. Period.
In this show he's so good. Yeah.
He's kind of like I wouldn't say a villain, but an anti-hero probably, and he's so honorable. Oh my god,
he is amazing in this show. Yeah.
Technically he's against Zorro, but like, I mean, like, damn, he's just so lovable. And what I was gonna get to in this scene is like, so Lolita makes kind of like a half joke, half serious kind of comment, like, okay, when you catch Zorro, we'll set the wedding date. And everyone else, in this very like prim, proper, like patriarchal circle, are like, oh no, you shouldn't make jokes like that, Lolita. A proper woman shouldn't make jokes like that. And he's like, okay, bet, I'll do it. And like he covered for her. That is honestly one of the most romantic gestures that I've ever seen in the Zorro franchise, and it came from someone who isn't Zorro.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. I love their dynamic a lot, and it baffles me that people ship Diego and Lolita in that show so much when that dynamic is right there. Oh my god, I love them so much, and I love Monasterio in this show. I love the nuance that they give him. It's just so cool. And I think we're starting to kind of like run out of stuff a little bit. So I think one other thing I wanted to bring up, they introduce a bit of a plot line that I'm not too crazy about. I don't think it really goes anywhere really, and I think they're saving a lot of it for season 2. But they introduce 2 characters that are kind of important, Guadalupe Montoro and Mr. Vanderveen. These 2 characters are basically...
Are they the 2 in New York where it's like...
One of them was in New York, one of them is in correspondence with him in California. Basically, they're both plotting to steal Don Alejandro's fortune. For why, I'm not telling you yet for spoiler reasons. But essentially, Vanderveen's like this American businessman guy in New York. He's modeled very obviously after Cornelius Vanderbilt. And basically, he's trying to look for some scruffy-looking guy in the wanted posters. Which, I mean... Abby already knows who it winds up being. It's kind of a meme at this point.
It's the best character in the entire series.
So true, bestie. But yeah, it's not super important for this episode, but it's just meant to set up stuff for the next one and the ones after that, which is fine.
It's sort of just setting up like it's a pretext. It's just like a little... I thought it was just like world building until it's like, oh, we have to do something, blah, 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 Don Alejandro's estate. I'm like, this is some motherfucker in New York. Why does he care about Don Alejandro's estate? Like, that is...
Yeah.
That is too far to care. Yeah. Unless this is going to be a recurring character.
You'll see. You'll see, basically. That's all I really want to say about that part, because I don't want to spoil you specifically. I feel like right now, I think that's all I really have to say about this show. Is there anything you guys want to say before we move on?
No.
I did want to say one last thing about just the episode as a whole. We touched over it a little bit when talking about like sort of the framework of it, but this was so well paced. Out of the episodes that I've watched, this episode had like the best balance of dialogue, action, drama. Oh my lord. Every single scene, the characters that are in it, even if they're just background, they're doing something that's important.
Exactly. It's like, I love the tone mixing in the show in general, but this episode also just is like a huge highlight for it. It has a lot of really funny moments. It has a lot of awesome action. It has a lot of intense drama and really, very intense scenes that, put you at the edge of your seat. There's a lot of, dramatic stuff that happens to people. There's a lot of really cathartic moments. There's a lot of really low stakes, kind of random moments that I like. There's a lot of setup for future stuff that, leaves you intrigued. Nolan aura farms into the camera. Diego aura farms into the camera, so I'm satisfied on that front. It's ultimately just a very solid episode in a series with a lot of solid episodes, and it stands out on its own with the stuff that it adds to the mythos of the character. And like, I don't know, this show does so much. It's so special, and there's a reason why I'm like specifically like, oh my god, this show's a year old, because this show deserves to be celebrated every year. This show is just chef's kiss.
Yeah.
And with that, is that you guys have anything left?
I think we said everything we need to say.
Yeah, no, that was.
Ultimately, if you haven't seen this show yet, watch the show, especially this episode. This episode's really good.
If you want to watch the show and you want to see it, I don't know, in like English or whatever, or at least with good subtitles, you could always join the Discord too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. You can do it.
Exactly.
You don't have to. You probably won't.
But it'd be pretty cool.
It's an option for you.
Exactly. We're like, that Discord server is filled with Zorro fans that are always eager to help people out. So, give us a call if you ever need. As for the next section, we're going to be talking about, favorite Zorro thing. In this case, favorite Zorro theme song. I think we did this a while ago, but...
We did, yeah, I do remember that.
Yes, but since there's been a couple new Zorros
I love the Sequoia Studios. The intro song, so badass, and I'm gonna put it like on my phone, and I want to listen to it. Yeah. But in terms of like a theme song, I at work have nobody's recognized it, but I do whistle "Zorro Rides Again into the Night." No.
The Disney one.
Riding along, singing a song, he lives, he takes and he gives.
It's really funny. It's not even like the intro song of that serial, but it's practically the theme. Like,
yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. It is so catchy. It is like it is more catchy than it is any right being. Oh my god, but yeah, like, that one's really good, and you are so right. Si Me Olivos Contigo is so awesome.
I think my favorite one still is the one from the Family Channel Zorro one. I think that's still my favorite theme song.
Oh yeah, that one is so catchy. I'm so glad we had Jay Asher on the show.
Yeah.
Because, like, he did a phenomenal job with that one. I honestly listen to that one a lot too. I listen to the alternate version a lot too. I think the soundtrack in that show was pretty good, and yeah, I really like that one a lot. It's very, and I say this as a compliment, it's very cheesy, very like 90s-esque. I love it.
Oh yeah.
And it has a lot of charm to it, just like the rest of the show. For me, I've been mulling this over a lot. The reason why I put this question on is because of some of the new ones. I love Si Me Olivas Contigo so much, to the point, before this show came out, they released this as one of the soundtrack teasers. And I listened to this non-stop. I would play video games. I would put the song in the background. I would talk to my friends here on Discord, and I would have it playing in the background. I would put it on music bots and Discord chats because I would not stop listening to it. It is so good. It's not necessarily my favorite song in the soundtrack for that show, but as a theme song, it is really good. But what surprised me recently is the Paramount Plus Zorro theme song, Kia Zorro, or Who is Zorro?
Oh, yeah.
That song... Yep.
No, I was going to say, I did remember listening to it when I watched it with you guys. I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah.
It is really catchy, and it is really interesting, and kind of serves as kind of like... We'll get into more about the themes of Paramount Zorro in the next episode, but in this, like... There's a lot of questions about identity and about who someone is and about parts of someone's personality. And I think someone succinctly put this to me in the Zorro Discord. We have so many theme songs about, oh, this is Zorro, this is what Zorro does, he is Zorro, this guy is Zorro. And for the first time, someone ever asks that question in one of these songs, who is Zorro?
Yeah.
And it fits so much, and I also love the motifs of the song mirror that of the Walt Disney Zorro. It takes a lot of the rhyme, not the rhyme, but like a lot of the flow and tempo and stuff like that of the Walt Disney Zorro and inverts it a little. Like, it takes a lot of the, I'm not a music guy, so I can't really describe it well, but it basically works as a mirror to the Walt Disney Zorro theme song. And I love it so much, that is so creative. And it's such a good song, and I love the alternate version as well, which is so atmospheric. I love it. I wish they used it for the show. And I still think my choice would probably be Si Me Vivas Contigo. I think it's so catchy. But Kia Zorro is definitely a close one up there, as well as the classic Walt Disney theme. And I think those are my choices specifically. And the last part of this podcast is the opinion one that which we discussed to ourselves. Which villain was the closest to beating Zorro?
Like in general, or related to the episode we watched?
In general. In general, like which Zorro villain of all time is the closest to beating their Zorro?
Here's what I'm thinking. I can't name too many of them from earlier, but ooh.
I do have a semi-weird one that, if you really think about it, does count as a Zorro villain. But I was going to say the nephew.
No.
If you really think about it,
it's okay.
They are the villains of their own movie. Yeah. They go out of their way to try and stop Zorro because everything we've been told about him is like, oh, he's a bad guy. If you see anything, like, they're so stupid that they like, oh yeah, we'll report everything. And they almost, that first scene at the house actually almost got fucking not Don Diego, Don Diego's son. What was his name in the movie? I forgot his name. Who is the new Zorro? Raphael almost got caught. If not, for Don Diego's like, hey, you wanna, let's go drink, but it's nothing, huh? Like, trying to stall him for time.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess the nephews are they're like a non-antagonist villain.
Yeah, they're not intentionally trying to destroy the lives of their cousin and their uncle, but at the same time they go out of their way to make sure to be like, we gotta thwart Zorro when he's here. We gotta report him to the governor.
Exactly.
And then hijinks ensue. It's not intentionally they're supposed to be the villains, but like it's funny to think about if you really stretch it. And they kind of do count, and they almost get him caught in a few. Also, the shit with the fucking in the first action scene when they're breaking all the people out of jail and shit. They destroyed his plan, and he almost got caught.
Yeah, and
by
all the people he freed get caught again because they hide in the barrels where they were supposed to hide. Yeah. Yeah, that's honestly such a good answer. I will completely let you choose that one. Like that.
I have a pretty good answer. I mean, I started going through my. I'm not going to use Sequoia or Paramount because I haven't really finished either series. I mean, I have finished Paramount, but I didn't watch like the first episode or two, so I haven't watched the beginning of that one. So I don't want to go on anything I haven't completed. I started thinking of some villains who I was like, did they ever get close? I'm thinking like Disney Monasterio. Nuh-uh. I don't even think the Order of the Feather in the Disney show got that close either.
Oh no, they don't. Not really.
I'm thinking
the Eagle.
Don DeLoro didn't get very close. Marston didn't get very close.
No.
Okay.
El Lobo was close, but I don't want it. Honestly, one of the closer ones I'm thinking of, like the duel at the end of 75, but I can't see that in any way going towards the Sarge. I also probably the least effective villain, definitely the Alcalde of Gayblade. Probably the worst hell that a Zorro villain is taken. But I'm starting to. I don't know the villains at this like level, but I'm starting to think of like a lot of villains from like the 30s and the silent era of Zorro, and I'm thinking like there's a lot of times where Zorro like they cliffhang and Zorro like is dead. One of them he gets like knocked out in a basement with a live bomb.
Yeah, Zorro.
And I was like, oh damn, he's just gonna, he's just gonna die here. That's one of the closest that I'm thinking of. I guess if you take the Antonio Banderas Zorro, but you take the older guy did succumb. Don Diego does succumb to his wounds given to him by his villain. I don't know if you want to count that as because he's not Zorro at that point, but
but also,
well, I mean, no. But in the very beginning, he does lose to him because that's when his wife is killed.
Absolutely. You could. I think I'm gonna go with that as my answer then. Montero, I think, is probably it's got the closest. If it doesn't even count as a, I think it counts as a win. Like you basically stole the guy's life.
Literally, Elena has been Elena Montero longer than she was Elena de la Vega. So, like, as for me, my original choice was going to be the villain from Paramount Zorro, since for a time he just flat out wins.
Yeah.
But I won't spoil anything about that, since we're going to be talking about Paramount Zorro later. But, like, that guy was originally going to be my choice, but I'm not gonna spoil anything about that. I'd say, I do think that the Esteban from Gayblade, he was pretty close. Without Bunny Wigglesworth, Diego would have been dead to rights. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, Bunny Wigglesworth. I'd say, I would have had Monasterio, but from the 50s Zorro, but I can kind of see why he wouldn't be, because outside of him just prematurely killing Diego, I feel like Diego actually had a good chance of just escaping that, which he did. Mm-hmm. Because everyone in the room didn't believe Monasterio, and there was no way he could have convinced them, because his disguise was just that good. So maybe not him. Pedro Victoria in the Sequoia Studios Zorro, in episode 1, he does kill Zorro. He literally kills Zorro. And the cyclical nature of Zorro in that show is the only reason that it goes on beyond 10 minutes.
True.
So it does good there. And, let's see. He's a good candidate, though. against Diego, I'd say that he hasn't really. He and 2024 Monasterio haven't really tested their mettle against him yet in a lot of these episodes. I do also want to say that Nalin got pretty close, but I don't want to spoil that either. I will probably have to say, this is tough. This is really tough. Because there's a lot of really good candidates that I think that I could say were the closest. I think literally if it weren't for the fact that Zorro in the show is a Native American tradition, I would say Pedro Victoria. Because Pedro Victoria flat out effortlessly kills Zorro.
Just murders him, yeah.
Yeah. But outside of that, the person who was the closest against Diego or a descendant of his, I'd say it's El Lobo. He was a second away from putting a 44 caliber hole through James Vega's head before his horse kills him. So I'd probably say El Lobo and by extension Marsden. Not to mention...
Yeah, Marsden did hire him, yeah.
Yeah. That'll probably be my answer. And I think that will probably be it for this podcast. I feel like that's all of the topics that we had. I'm genuinely really happy and thankful to have you guys on here for another episode.
Yeah, same
don't thank me.
It's always
thank
nice
Jack.
to talk to...
So true.
Yes, thank you, me. It's always nice to be able to have people to talk to about Zorro, and I can't wait to get to the next episode with you guys. It's been a pleasure doing this episode. Farewell, everyone. This is Jack Clock and Crow and Worm. And
don't forget Worm.
We are signing off. And don't forget Worm. I said that. Don't worry. All right, signing off.